I'm sure everybody on the call is anxiously awaiting for the holiday break to come. Really appreciate you joining us during the noontime here for today's webinar to talk a little bit more about multiple measures placement service. This meeting is going to be recorded, and so we will distribute the recording of the webinar out to everybody, and give everybody access to the recording so that they can share it with other folks who may not have been able to attend, and make sure that we get that out to a pretty broad group of folks, just in case there were folks that were not able to attend. So with that, we'll kind of jump in things here. Please feel free to use the chat functionality to post any questions, and we'll do our best job to keep to kind of answer those questions as we move along, and get everybody's questions answered. What we're going to be going over today is a high-level overview. I'm going through an overview of MMPS and giving everybody an understanding of how it functions, talking a little bit about what MMPS can do for your college. And then we're going to take a little bit of a dive into the data that is being provided by MMPS, and giving an understanding of how to use the data that is being provided. And finally, we're going to spend the latter part of the hour going through some examples of how MMPS is being used out in the real world, and talk about next steps for any colleges who are curious or interested about learning more about the implementation and adopting MMPS as well. So without further ado, we'll kind of jump in here. MMPS is a free service that's made available to all colleges who are using CCC Apply for their standard application. And so CCC Apply is the submission of an application is what triggers all of our workflows. And the output from MMPS is data that is delivered to the colleges that includes both the AB 705 recommended level of support for English, for statistics and liberal arts mathematics, as well as for STEM mathematics, and as well as higher level math eligibility for students where we have accurate data and where students are eligible, and we do have that information available. We are able to provide higher level math coursework eligibility. And then all of that information is delivered directly to the colleges. That's enabled through the superglue infrastructure that we use throughout the tech center to help deliver and integrate our data directly into the student information systems that are in use and in play throughout the system. It's been developed in partnership with the Chancellor's Office and the AB 705 Advisory Committee. It's a rather complex partnership that we have that requires us to pull information and exchange information with a lot of partners. And so luckily fortunately we've been able to have some really great folks to work with as we've moved along here. Externally, internally, we have a lot of integrations with other tech center applications, CCC Apply being one of them. We have a feed that's, as of right now, that's feeding into the student profile service that is under the MyPath umbrella, as well as pushing the data out into the data warehouse. Externally, we've worked with the California College Guidance Initiative, CCGI, Educational Results Partnership, and then we're in the early developmental stages of enabling the integration with the California Department of Education as well. So as you can imagine, coordinating efforts across all of those partners has added some complexity. But as I said, fortunately, we've had some really great and willing partners that have helped us pull all of this together in a pretty efficient and effective manner. The multiple measures placement service is a web-based workflow service. There's really no front-end user experience. It really operates behind the scenes in collecting the data that is available, the high school transcript data that is available, generating the placements, and then delivering that information to colleges. And it really does kind of to work in those three simple steps. As I mentioned before, our workflows are triggered by a submission of an application on CCC Apply. So once an application has gone through spam filtering, as well as attempted to pull back some information from the California Department of Education, The applications go into a queue that are then picked up by multiple measures placement service, and that kicks off those 3 steps. So once that application hits that queue, we go and attempt to pull in all available high school transcript information, whether that is verified information that's coming in from CCGI, or data that's available over an ERP. We also pull in the self-reported data from the application, get that consolidated down. Once we've got all of the data that's available, we analyze the data to determine which is the best source of data to use for placements, and then we deliver that information over to the colleges. This is a high-level overview of how the system works. And sorry, I've got some weird the yeses are kind of wrapping text in a bit of odd here in this graph, so my apologies. But this gives us an idea of how the system works. Again, submission of application on CCC Apply kicks us off. Then we go and attempt to identify any sources of high school transcript information that we have available for that specific student. That runs through the decision logic that produces the AB 705 recommended level of supports, as well as the higher level math eligibility. We then pass that information over to the colleges through the superglue gateway, as well as writing that information out to the data warehouse as well. What MMPS can do for your college? So for colleges and specifically within departments within specific colleges, that have adopted the statewide decision logic, the AB 705, as I stated before, provides recommended level of support for English, statistics, liberal arts, math, as well as the STEM pathway, as well as providing eligibility using the statewide MMAP decision logic for higher level math. For colleges or departments that have not opted for the default statewide decision logic, we provide access to verified transcript data when available, and this integrates locally with the custom tools and processes that are currently in play throughout the system. Our data set includes from a transcript data perspective, we provide GPA, the highest English and math and respective grades, the grade level completed, as well as flags that indicate whether or not a student has completed Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. Using the data, when we look at the recommendations that are provided, from an AB 705 perspective, we assume that placement is going into is for transfer level, and we're identifying the recommended level of support that a student would need based on their transcript information. And that's using the statewide default rules. And when we look, just kind of looking into these rules from an English perspective, this is how we are determining the recommended level of support using the statewide decision logic. So primarily based on GPA alone for the English side of things. When we look at the SLAM side, again, primarily based on GPA. So we are able to provide the recommended level of support for English and for SLAM solely based on the student's GPA performance. When we look at the STEM recommendation, in addition to looking at GPA, we also have some information that we also look at course completion information. So in the instance where a student may have a little bit of a lower GPA, if they're currently enrolled or they've completed calculus, their eligibility, their recommended level of support is going to change a little bit. So STEM is a little bit different from SLAM and from English, which are solely based on GPA. For STEM, we do use GPA, but there are other situations where we look at what courses have been completed by the student to determine the recommended level of support. From a higher level math eligibility perspective, students are provided recommendations into trigonometry, pre-calculus, and calculus. When we look at the rule set, we understand there are prerequisites the student must have completed in order to be eligible to go into specific coursework. And so these prerequisites are going to be in place. So if the student has not fulfilled the prerequisites, we won't run the rule set, but if the student has completed the prerequisites, then we will, then we run the rule sets to determine whether or not the student is eligible. And as you can see over here on the rules, we do use a combination of both GPA as well as course completed and the respective grade that the student has received in that course as well. In addition to that, so that information is primarily being used by colleges who have adopted the statewide rules. For colleges that have adopted localized decision logic, we provide additional data elements that can be used as input into those local processes and tools. And so, as I mentioned before, from a transcript perspective, this is the information that we're providing that is currently off of the transcript that's part of the MMPS data dictionary. We're in the process of evaluating and entertaining requests from colleges that may be looking at additional data elements that would be beneficial, or other data elements that are being used in their local tools. For instance, we have a college right now that we're working with that really is looking at a much more accurate and complete picture of the coursework that the student has completed in high school. And so their local tool looks to the information that looks to all of the courses that the student has completed throughout their tenure in high school. So rather than just looking at the highest grade completed, this college is looking for what coursework was completed in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade as well. So we're starting to work with the field to get a better understanding of what data from a verified transcript perspective would be useful locally. And we're more than likely, we're establishing a process that would review the requests from the field, obtain approval for incorporating those data elements into the data dictionary and making them available, and then rolling that out to the field. More than likely, we'll be looking at kind of a twice a year time frame in which we would go through the cycles of reviewing all of the requests, getting them prioritized, and then put into the roadmap for how we would add those additional data elements. So when we get to the end of this email, when we get to the end of this presentation, you'll have my email address, to which you can send me an email that would, if you have any specific requests for additional data elements that you think would be valuable for your college. Can't guarantee that all of them are going to get approved, but the best you can do is ask, and that way you can send me some information about what additional data elements would be beneficial for your local tools and processes that would help support your students in the best way possible. So when we look at outside of the transcript information, the other data elements that are currently being delivered with MMPS, we provide the CCC ID. That is the way that we're tracking and tying the MMPS records back to the students' open CCC account, so that we can track and see all of their placements, so we can track all of their placements across their applications. We provide a placement status that basically has one of three values. So placement complete is defined as we have all of the information that would allow us to be able to provide both the AB 705 recommended level of support, as well as the higher level math eligibility. From a partial placement status, typically that indicates that we don't have all of the transcript information that's necessary to be able to provide all of the placements, both the AB 705 and the higher level math. And typically this is usually what's happening on the side of, from the self-reported perspective. If we have verified transcript information, we should have a complete picture of all of the information and be able to provide a complete placement and recommendation record from MMPS. But in the event that we only have GPA, if we don't have any of the completed coursework information that the student has completed in high school, we are limited in terms of being able to provide, especially all of the higher level math courses, as well as we are somewhat limited in our ability to provide an accurate STEM placement without necessarily knowing the highest level math course that this student has completed. In the event that when we go out to see if there's transcript data that is available for students, if we come back empty-handed, that's going to result in an inability to provide any placement information for recommendations for that specific student. And your college will receive a notification from MMPS that says, we attempted to generate recommendations for this specific student, but because of the lack of any data, we came up empty-handed. So we do notify the colleges when that situation arises. In addition to the CCC ID, in some situations, we will have access to the statewide identifier that's used throughout the K-12 system as well. So not all records are necessarily going to have the SSID. Our ability to leverage the SSID is really dependent, and provide the SSID is dependent on two different things. One is our ability to, if the transcript data came from CCGI, the SSID is included in that information and would be provided to the colleges for those specific students. We also have an integration between CCC Apply and the California Department of Education that executes at the end of the application submission, in which we hand over a hash up of personally identifiable information for students to CCC, to CDE. They attempt to match that information to a unique student in their database. And when we do successfully match it to that unique student, they respond back to us with the SSID. So in those two situations, we would have the ability to provide the SSID to the colleges, and we do deliver that directly. Of course, the MIS code is part of that. We also identify the data source that was used as input into the decision logic, identifying the highest grade completed. This is information this is a new field that's going to be coming across once there's an update and change that's taking place within CCC Apply that is going to change some of the questions that are being asked of students from a self-reported perspective. The current iteration of those self-reported questions in the application ask the students whether or not they have completed the 11th grade. And starting after the break, most likely sometime during a release in the first quarter of in Q3, sometime between, I believe somewhere around the March timeframe, there'll be that question is going to change from asking whether or not the student has completed 11th grade to asking the student what is the highest grade level that has been completed. And so that is specifically, the rules are designed to apply to students that have completed 11th grade. The memo that came out from the Chancellor's office a few months ago identified the need to be able to support concurrently enrolled students that have completed at least the 9th grade and are also going to be enrolling in college level coursework at the same time, so that we can provide recommended level of support for students who have completed at least the 9th grade. So if they have not completed 9th grade, we will not be able to provide any placement recommended level of support for those students. But for the students that have completed at least 9th grade, we'll now be able to provide and support those students that are a special admit as well. The app ID, so this is the CCC Apply application ID. This is designed to assist with matching. We know that we've got some feedback from across the field that students are submitting multiple applications and wanting the ability to successfully match specific MMPS records to the specific application that triggered the MMPS generation. So that is the goal of providing the app ID. And then finally, we provide a timestamp that indicates exactly when the placement was generated itself. From a data source priority perspective, this left-hand column over here identifies the source of the priority of the source. The column over here on the right identifies the MMPS identifier for that data source. So in a prioritized fashion, whenever we have data that is available from CCGI, that transcript data will be used to produce the placement. CCGI has access to near real-time transcript data from their partner high school districts. And so that gives us access to in-progress coursework that we don't typically have access to in our other data sources, in that most of the information that is provided in CalPass Plus and in CalPads, when we have access to that data, as well as self-reported data, we're asking what coursework has been completed. And so we're not necessarily asking about in-progress coursework. And so that is what particularly makes the CCGI data set so desirable.
Hey, John, I'm going to jump in here. We've got some questions in the chat, and I want to make sure we don't lose them before we move on too much further. So we had one that was, does completed Algebra 2 equal with a C or better? That was for 10 minutes ago or so. Not sure if that got answered.
I don't believe that, that's a good question. I would need to confirm with Dan Lamery from ERP, who's unfortunately unable to attend today's webinar. I believe that the answer is that yes, they have completed it with a C or better. So I think it is a successful completion of Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. But we will track these questions and make sure that anything that we don't get answered in today's webinar, that when we distribute out the recording to the webinar, that we do get any questions that we were unable to answered in that communication as well.
Then the next question is, of the various ways your system gets data, roughly what proportion of the placements are based on the self-reported information?
That's a great question. We are working on analyzing that data as of right now, and we anticipate being able to give some statistics and metrics about verified data versus self-reported data. I know that Ben Baird, are you on Ben Baird from CCGI? Are you on the call right now?
Yeah, I'm here.
Can you give us an idea of, like, at least from CCGI's perspective, do you have a rough idea about how many transcripts you're transmitting over to MMPS?
Yeah. Specifically, we looked at it earlier. It's since July 1st, we've sent just over 70,000 transcripts.
So I'm not sure exactly how which is fantastic. So CCGI that represents a pretty significant number of transcript data. I'm not sure exactly the number of students from which we're getting data from CalPass, but again, I will try and track down some of these metrics and include that information in the communication that goes out as well.
And on that note, the Technology Center is working on an upgrade to our report center. So many of you are probably familiar with that. It's been primarily focused around CCC Apply, but we're expanding it to include MyPath and MMPS usage data. And so this is the kind of information that we're hoping to make available in standard reports. And we will also have some custom functionality built into that. We're working through some challenges with regards to accessing the report center from a secure user perspective right now with the upgrade that happened. And so once that's all in place, we'll put a notification out to the field, but this will also be included going forward. So we're kind of in the middle of that effort right now, and we'll work to answer the questions that have come up here in the interim.
And Lee, your question about when is the app ID going to be delivered to the colleges via the SuperGlue adapter, that was a defect in which there was a translation, a naming field discrepancy that was preventing the delivery of the app ID out to banner colleges. We are in the process of pushing that fix out to pilot, and we anticipate that following after the new year, that deployment will be pushed out to production, and that app ID value will start populating for banner colleges. So if you're a banner school that's adopted MMPS, you have not been receiving the app ID, but that information is going to start populating for records forthcoming. Lee, I know that you had asked a question in our prior conversations about how we might be able to backfill the prior records. and we'll need to figure out and work with Dan Lambery from over at ERP to figure out how we can backfill that information for you as well. So again, CCGI is going to be our most preferred source of data. Once we have the integration with CDE in place, we're going to be looking at CDE, pulling CDE information into the mix here. And so we have configured the system to be able to combine data sources together to provide the most accurate picture of the student's high school performance and history. And so when we look at the next kind of couple of sources, and you can see there's a couple of different places where we're combining CalPADS, CalPlus, and self-reported. Next priority would be CalPADS plus self-reported. CalPADS will be the next priority. From there, we go to CalPAS and self-reported data, CalPAS data, then finally self-reported data only if we don't have any verified data available. And then of course, when we don't have any data available, that's when we pass over that and transmit over that no placement record to the system. And the question here, does CCGI always have the most recent data? How old is the data in the other data sources? Is the date or grade level that a student completed a course going to be brought over? So Ben Baird, I'll let you answer the first part of that question if you don't mind.
No. Good question. So do we always have the most recent data compared to the other sources? Probably yes, because we're student educator facing in that K-12 environment. So we get data usually about every 2 weeks, some districts every day. How old is the data in the other data sources? Well, the CDE, that's a separate conversation, and I can't speak to the CalPAS Plus, so I'll let John talk about that.
Yeah.
Is the date or grade level that a student completed a course going to be brought over? It's transmitted by us. Not sure if it makes it all the way down. Right.
So the completion dates that could be, if that information would be valuable to your college, that would be if you would send me an email you'll have access. You'll have my email address here at the end of the presentation here. If that's a request to have the dates completion of that coursework, you can send us that email if you would request, if you're going to request that. From the how old is the data in the other data sources, it's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the date. When we get the integration with the Department of Education in place, high school districts, LEAs, are submitting their completion data at the end of every academic year to the Department of Education, and so it is course completion data, and so that's kind of the differentiator between CCGI and certainly with CalPADS. CalPAS is similar to CalPADS in that it is completion data, year-end completion data, and the age of their data is really dependent upon when the high school district or the LEA actually shares that data with CalPAS. And from what we've seen in terms of kind of different from colleges who have partnered with CalPAS, is that some LEAs, and I'm sure you can all relate to this, some high school districts are really on top of things and are staying current with keeping the most recent completion data at CalPAS. Some other high schools and high school districts are not so great at that, unfortunately. And so we do see some lags in some of the fulfillment on the district side of things to get data over to CalPAS. One last question there. For out-of-state non-resident students, would their data strictly be self-reported? Yes, since all of the sources of verified transcript data that we have integrated with as of this point are California high schools and high school districts, the verified data that we do currently have access to is only for in-state California, for students who have completed or have attended high school in California. Okay, increasing accuracy in input data. So we certainly know that self-reported data, the memo from the Chancellor's Office, it certainly has indicated that self-reported data has been validated as being accurate. We are seeing some instances where students are changing, and while we certainly do expect that there is going to be an evolution of self-reported data when applications by the same student are being submitted over time, we would expect that their self-reported data to evolve as new information becomes available to the student. We're seeing some instances where some of that data is changing in a relatively short period of time. We are doing analysis on that. At this point, it's nothing that we're alarmed about, but we're doing an analysis to make sure that what we're seeing is within a reasonable range of to be able to feel very confident about the information that's being provided. Obviously, verified data is desirable, and I think a lot of colleges would agree that it is desirable to have access to the verified data, and that really is the design and intent of MMPS. The Chancellor's Office wanted to be able to provide verified data. They understand the impact that AB 705 has represented to a lot of processes and departments throughout the system, and just kind of the revolutionary change that the adoption of AB 705 has represented to the entire system, and that having a tool and a resource for verified data would be desirable as we move forward with the AB 705 implementation. I know that we certainly know that a lot of colleges have adopted and built out custom tools that primarily rely on verified data, primarily rely on self-reported data. And so now we're working, as I said, we're working with those colleges, and we're seeing colleges are currently using, and which we'll see kind of here as we get into the talking about how MMPS is being used in the real world, about how colleges are using the verified data or the information that's being provided by MMPS to help contrast and compare the information that is being reported by the students, and helping get the students to the most accurate placement level for them. So from a best practices perspective, ideally we want to clear the path for students to continue on with the matriculation process, right? MMPS is being delivered to the staging tables or via staging tables or CSV to colleges, depending on your integration with Superglue. Your student user experience around how you're communicating the information to the student is locally defined. And in a lot of ways, we've seen some fantastic examples of how colleges are communicating and providing students with the most accurate and up-to-date information, and in a very prescriptive way, being able to guide and direct students into next steps that will help them register for courses. And again, being able to provide, if your college has adopted the statewide default rules, leveraging the placement recommendations that are being provided by MMPS, or if your college has adopted localized decision logic, that they're able to access verified data if so desired, and use that verified data in their local processes and tools. Okay, so I'm gonna stop my sharing here, and I'm gonna hand hand it over to Antoine Andari, who is going to show us exactly how MMPS is being used at Monterey Peninsula College. Antoine?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. Before I share, let me like to share my screen. There we go. So before I go into the our application, we are the Monterey Peninsula College, and we have one of the few colleges left on in-house built or homegrown built SIS system. So we're looking at next year for the bond to be able to implement a banner or a new ERP system. So with that said, just giving you an overview on the process, we are localized decision logic college. So we're using the MMPS data, such as GPA, highest English taken, highest English taken grade, highest math taken, highest math taken grade. We had the question of a completed 11th grade, and then we did away with it because it was giving us trouble because it's, you know, more of a binary. And we found out initially that everybody was falling on the lower placement, and we were kind of wondering, something is wrong here. So we did away with that, and I'll explain to you the logic behind our localized decision tree. So the process is as follows. We pull data from MMPS, the GPA and the grades, and then we compare them to a matrix, a criteria that we have developed here internally with the English department, as well as also with the math department. And we do generate based on that data that we pull down every 5 minutes. By the way, we pull them down from CCC Apply. We use the CCC ID as one of the unique identification for the students. We compare the information to our localized decisions tree, and then we generate a placement and we issue an email immediately. So depending on when the students is applying on CCC Apply, they receive their placement email or recommended placement email within a maximum 5 minutes. It could be as little as 1 minute or less. So in the email, we indicate to them not only the placement, but we give them other information, how to proceed for registrations and other information, other services that we provide. With that, also we provide them, in addition, we tell them, based on this, on your application, your CCC ID is such and such, and then we generate an internally system-generated placement ID for them. So we give them 2 IDs, the one they already know, CCC ID, and the placement ID, which is an MPC ID. Those are the credentials that we give them in order for them, and we also recommend to them. This is the placement recommendation. However, if you feel like you are, you could or you should be placed better, here's the guided self-placement link, and that link puts them into a form where they can actually take a test, or not a test, it's really a list of questionnaires. For instance, in English, there's 5 questions, and really that gives them, that asks them whether or not they can do certain things. On the math side, we have two sections, two different forms, one for BSTEM and the other one for SLAM. And in either case, they go through a problem with the solution in it, and they'll answer whether they feel comfortable with that, whether they need help, etc. So that information actually help them, and we take the answers that they get, and then if they are placed, if we feel like they're placed higher, we send them immediately an email. We actually send them an email for the new placement. But if their placement is higher, based on the guided self-placement questionnaire answers, then we send them that and we say, your new placement, by the way, is XYZ. And we do that for all 3 sections, meaning English, Math BSTEM, and Math SLAM. If they place lower than what the CCC Apply grades and the logics that we initially generated for them, then they are, we don't place them less or below that, but if they are higher, we place them higher. Once we, and all that communication goes really between, from CCC Apply to us, to our system, to the students back and forth. And then while we're doing that, we're also updating our SIS for the placement, what we call a placement equivalency ID, so that way when they are ready to register, the information is available for them there. And the system will either allow them to register for certain courses or not. So before I go, I just want to show you. So this is kind of more or less the process of how we using the data, and I'll show you also the logic that we've used. And we developed the logic, by the way, with the English department for the English side and the math department for the math side. So in addition to this, once we take the data in, we used a lot of charts and tables and reports so that we can generate, you know, a little bit more information and about, you know, how many students are they applying, how many students they're registering after they apply, actually they come into MPC, how many students are taking the guided self-placement, English versus math. We provide, as what you're looking at here is a dashboard. And by the way, the system or the platform that we're using, we use a cloud-based platform. We developed the application, and it's called Zoho. Zoho is a web-based and web development tool, and it's called, actually, they have several products. One of them is the Zoho Creator, which is the web development tool. And it's a cloud-based, again, which allows us to not only develop the operational piece for the placement, which, you know, does the communication between students, CCC Apply, and our SIS system, but also allows us to generate a sets of reports and data analytics and, you know, some information and decision information system as well. Some of that I'll share with you. For instance, if you're looking, this is a dashboard where we show how many students actually, the total number of students, 27,000. This is something that we included in that, some of our current students, but the new applicants, and we started our AB 705 back in April. So we started the summer 2019 and summer fall, and now we're starting to receive application, and there'll be placement in spring 2020. So we capture all that information. We have all the data available to us. Just to give you an idea, and some of, for instance, the math placement, this tells me here how many actually people ended up registering and where they were placed for the B stamp. This is for all the terms, but let's say for the fall, that's how many people, and it's broken down by gender. But and if you notice, you know, the Math 20 is more on the lesser side. Obviously, the GPA is one of the contributors, but if you move the GPA to 3 or higher, you know, or actually it's 4 or higher, we notice that on the Math 20A, things change over here. Also, depending on whether they take in the highest level English, you know, if you choose the pre-calculus, as John indicated, or algebra 1 and 2, I think is 6, then, you know, that also changes the way the chart shows. So there's a bunch of things that tells us, you know, that, you know, how well, and if our logic is working according to the MMPS data that we're pulling out of the CCC Apply. We do the same thing for English as well. And I'm just gonna minimize this, sorry. On the guided self-placement, we notice, this is just, let me go back to, on the on the English guided self-placement, we realized that, you know, and we still haven't done the pre and post data because we're still receiving data for the full fall 2019, is that almost 90% of people who actually took the guided self-placement in English, they upgraded themselves to English 1A. and very few, based on their answer, were recommended to them to take the English 101A as a support class. So clearly the guided self-placement, we realize proportionally has helped students upgrade themselves to the next level. And likewise on the BSTEM and the SLAM, we also realized that the majority, they were able to upgrade themselves to the math and 12 or 16 versus, taking additional recommended courses. We are still yet, haven't done the comparison to see how impactful the AB 705 and and using the guidelines from the Chancellor's Office, the AB 705 committee, we followed all of the guidelines, and we're going to evaluate how well the students that were placed higher that would have been otherwise placed lower if we didn't have AB 705 and vice versa. So these are some of the information that we're going to be analyzing soon. Just to give you an idea on what the system is doing, this is the live data, which is seeing these are new applicants coming from CCC applying for spring 2020. And in each hour, we display, because we're getting the data every 5 minutes into our system, we show how many students are applying. We also able to look at other, as I refer to decision-making information that, for instance, this is for the fall, we have what we call the conversion rate, 66%, meaning for all the students that apply, 66% actually ended up registering at least one course, this tells us that 33% either went to some of our neighboring colleges or didn't actually attend. So that gives us an opportunity to reach out to some of those students as well. So the information really, in addition to providing the placement assessments, etc., we are looking at leveraging some of that data to maximizing our enrollment and, doing some other things. A number of other on the self assessment. I hope everybody is still hearing me because I'm showing my internet is being unstable. I'm trying to show some other information here. For instance, the guided self-placement chart is showing me the English versus the math, how many students are taking. Again, not all the students are taking advantage of the guided self-placement, but I will show you also real quick the form. So the form, when the students click on their links that we send them in their email and telling them, we recommend, this is the placement that we recommend for you. However, you can take this guided self. And we give them the credentials that I mentioned, CCC ID, and the other one is the placement ID, which we generate. This is just for extra security because, just in case students had somebody else were able to get their CCC ID, we generate another ID for them. And they put the information and then we display, we know who they are. And they go through, I believe it's 6 questions. And it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, and based on whether strong, agree, and we have, I believe, like 3 or more unsure or disagree, then we place them with the support course 101A. Similar for SLAM, it's slightly different. We show them problems and then the solution, and we say, well, are you confident in your ability to solve this problem? Yes, and based on their answers, and we have about, I believe, 11 or 12 problems. based on their answers, we place them with either recommended, strongly recommended, or just with a higher mat placement. And I believe one more thing I wanted to share with you. So our localized decision logic is really a matrix table which shows, for instance, we're using, I think, John, you displayed it pretty well in terms of, well, for English it's simpler. Let me go to the English side first, because it's really the GPA, the ranges, we go from 0.1 to 2.59. The first two are because we get some percentage of the data coming in with blank grades or GPAs, so we had to account for that, and typically we place them on the lower level or recommend their placement on the lower level. This one here is for 3.1, 2.59. We put on, we place them in the support. If they're obviously 2.6 GPA, and we use C grade as the minimum, and then we place them in 1A. So on the English side, is the logic is pretty straightforward. On the math side, well, we have B stamp placement and SLAM. In between the two, it's a little bit more granular, I think, than the CCC applied, the MMPS that John highlighted. So we go a little bit more granular, and then we use the GPA ranges. We did away with the completed 11th grade because it was causing us a lot of problems. And then we use the highest level math taken. I believe 12 is calculus, 11 is pre-calculus. And 10 is trigonometry, I believe 6 is algebra 2. And then the grades, I think we use C or better, and based on that, we place them. So obviously, the different placement go that. So that is the matrix logic or the table that we use to recommend the placement, and then on top of that, they receive the option to take the guided self-placement in all three categories. So now we have that information along with what's coming up so far. We already have the the withdrawal grade. So if a student had withdrawn from or dropped out from English 1A for whatever reason, we are gonna be comparing that to where they were placed initially and try to come up with some decision making. The other analytics we're gonna be doing is comparing, truly looking at the different ranges of GPA and whether or not, what kind of impact did it have on the success. So basically we're looking at success rate analytics and whether or not these ranges we need to go back and review them and either making them, again, staying within the guidelines, but making modification in terms of whether or not we need to strengthen them or loosen them up more and so forth. So that is kind of information I think is also helpful for us as part of the guided pathway. So I will, John, I think this is pretty much it in a nutshell. There's a bunch of charts and so forth. We also, one more thing, we get a lot of operational data statistics in terms of how many emails we send every day. That also tells us how, what day of the week actually we have the highest application coming in. And how many, and as we get closer to the semester, we get even more information. There's one more thing, this also tells us, we get a lot of data points to see when students, and this helps the student services organization to go out, reach out to high schools and help students in their application process or help them, with some of the information at the local high schools. based on data that we collect and we notice we see a spike as we get closer to the semester, before the beginning of the semester, in terms of the applications. And then also we see, when students do register after they apply. So, John?
Awesome. Thanks, Antoine. Really, really appreciate you showing us all what you all at Monterey have built here. It's pretty impressive. Really, really great.
Any questions?
Looks like there are a couple of other questions here. Is there any process for identifying ESL students? As of right now, the data that's being delivered by MMPS does not make an identification of any potential students who could potentially be served better by an ESL curriculum. We are looking at high school transcript data. There are some indicators in the transcript data that would that could potentially indicate that a student has completed ESL coursework in high school, which may or may not necessarily be an indicator of that they should go into an ESL curriculum at the collegiate level, but at least being able to identify the students who have completed ESL coursework in high school, that more than likely will be part of implementation for support for ESL. I believe that the last update that I've got is that the process and the rules for the parameters for ESL have not been finalized yet, and so we'll be as those parameters get finalized by the AB 705 Advisory Committee, that will translate into features and functionality that is available inside of MMPS.
John?
Yes.
Yeah, so in addition for ESL, we are taking from CCC Apply if the student indicates that they are interested in English as a second language. And if that flag comes in as true, we are, we take that into consideration when we recommend the English as a second language when they take the guided self-placement as well. So again, this is self-reported. We also develop the English as a second language evaluation.
Okay.
And take that test, and it's really a more assessment test that we offer.
Excellent. Well, Antoine, if you don't mind stopping your share, I will just share. We're almost at the end of the mark here, and so I will talk a little bit about next steps. So for colleges who are interested in learning more about MMPS and talking about steps for adoption and implementation, here's the contact information for myself. We have a wonderful team of college relationship managers that are part of our enabling services team. Those individuals are assigned to specific colleges, and if you email that crms@ccctechcenter.org, we will make sure that the appropriate college relationship manager responds and reaches out and answers your questions and sets up any kind of next steps that are necessary there.
And I encourage everyone to reach out. This is Jennifer Coleman. I'm one of the statewide program directors from the Technology Center. We are still looking at feedback in terms of usability and the functionality of MMPS. So we encourage you to reach out to John, talk to your CRMs, get your questions out there. If you'd like to be connected with colleges who are using your same SIS in terms of what it might look like beyond initial implementation that's been shown, we're happy to make those connections as well. So feel free to reach out, and we're working on building our user community and making sure that we're answering questions and being responsive to the needs from each of you at your colleges. So thank you for attending today. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your holiday break.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Bye.